Today I'm talking with Johannes Stelzer. He's a physicist and one of the founders of Lunar Ring, which is an AI art collective from Germany, where they explore new forms of creativity and the collaboration between humans and AI. He has spent over a decade researching the intersection of neuroscience and AI at the Max Planck Institute and studies the potential of creative generative intelligence. So Johannes, welcome. It's great to talk to you here on Metamind.
Hi, Eben. Thank you for the invitation and thanks for the opportunity to talk a little bit about our work and to share the progress of this field.
Okay, so you're interested in, so you're a physicist. You've also studied neuroscience. You're interested in generative AI and art, and then maybe even psychedelics, which maybe we can get to later. So could you tell us a little bit about your origin story? How did you get interested in all of these different things?
Well, I got interested in physics because that's like a really, really general way to study the world and to study the phenomena of the world. And I was really fascinated, also from a theory of science perspective, because if you read philosophy of science, theory of science, then always physics is the kind of prime example of how science should be done, because we have at the one side very strong experiments that are questions to nature, and on the other side we have theory, and they are completely beautifully intertwined. And so there's a lot of theories basically that come from first principles that you can derive everything just from a couple very small assumptions. And I found that super fascinating because it really tells a lot about the world. So I think that's why I got really interested in physics, and that's why I decided to study physics, because that's a very good way to approach the world. Later on, already during the end of my studies, I actually went into neuroscience, already studying the dynamics of neurons, studying the dynamics of cells under a microscope. That's actually how I started doing science. Spent a lot of time in the lab observing and cultivating neurons, which is really a terrible way of spending your time, I should say. It's really awful, because it's just like growing these kind of super spoiled cells on a petri dish in your laboratory, and having them getting infected all the time and die. It's like having a really nasty Tamagotchi that is really not a pleasant thing to have, but nevertheless was really interesting studying and also observing them forming networks and all of that. So I got really super curious about that, to a degree that I then decided, okay, I want to go full on neuroscience now and want to really dive a little bit more into this. So I started a PhD at the Max Planck Institute in Leipzig, where we had one of the most powerful brain scanners actually at that time, a 7 Tesla brain scanner, and allowed us to really deeply look into the dynamics of human cognition ultimately. So you can basically with that study the brain activity or traces of brain activity relating to blood flow in a human being, while without having to inject any tracer or anything. It just works with the blood. It's really fascinating technology. And that's where I also started touching base with machine learning, because in that time it was very much en vogue to do what was called brain decoding, which is actually really fascinating. So basically you go inside of a scanner and you think of something, and whatever you think is being read out by the scanner and extracted in some way. Yeah, it's a little bit like a mind reading machine, and I found that super interesting, that it's actually possible to read our mind and to understand also something about brain function with that. That got me really interested in machine learning itself, and that machines can understand patterns. And I still find that super fascinating, because back in the days when we were doing this petri dish analysis I was talking about before with the microscope, we would program our own computer vision algorithms. For instance, we would program an algorithm, hey, a neuron, we have an idea, it looks like this and this and like this and this, and now let's try to run it and detect it. And you see, boom, 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 it finds all of these neurons. But it doesn't find this one. So you change the algorithm a little bit. You say, okay, it could also be a little bit like this and this pattern and so on. So you hard code all of that stuff like classical computer vision. While this more machine learning based approach is really different. You say, okay, these neurons have a certain pattern, and let's have the machine figure out the patterns in a nutshell. Yeah. the machine figures out the patterns for us, and we can use that. And that's a really interesting approach, a learning-based approach, actually, to like a self-teaching system ultimately, and to watch that. I find that super fascinating, that machines can extract patterns from data, and we can use them.
It is. It's fascinating. In fact, I mean, we talked a little bit before we started here, right? We're both fascinated with generative AI. What is this thing? What is generative AI? From your, like, when you think about it privately, how do you hold it in your mind? How do you represent it?
I present it like as a lot of different kind of methods and approaches, but what they have in common is not the technology that is underlying them, but what they have in common is that they're able to invent new stuff. They can invent new stuff that hasn't been there before, and that is something that is useful. I mean, you could also argue that something that outputs random numbers is invent something new, but it's not useful. Like, but generative AI is able to make up something, invent something like a book or like a painting or something that can have some intrinsic use that we can attach to it. But from the method perspective, it's actually really interesting. If you think about it, one of the breakthrough applications for generative AI was developed in the little university town where I did a postdoc in another Max Planck Institute where I was working. And what they did is essentially, it was called neural style transfer. It was like 2015, around 2014, maybe, the paper. And maybe some of you remember that, like, you could put in a photo of yourself and say, oh, Van Gogh. And then or this picture from Van Gogh, and it would transfer the style of that picture onto your own photo, which for us, it is like watching this is utterly fascinating. That it looked so beautiful that a machine can do something like this. But the really interesting thing here is that actually the method that creates this is just actually nothing else than a standard neural network that was used for object detection. Yeah, so it's basically an object detection network. We always used to call these networks like a dog, cat, house network, basically, that is able to differentiate between these object categories. You have like 1,000 of them. That's how back in the days it was done. And you use this network, which is a perceptual network. We can think of it, it aids our perception. Yeah, it's like a computer vision perception network, because you throw in a picture and you see it's a house or whatever. Yeah. And you take that network, but you actually don't optimize now like in the training process, the weights to detect something. So to teach it, oh, you need to change these and these weights. So it's really becoming more apparent that this is a house. But you use that network to draw in the pixel space, to modify the pixels itself, so that the internal representation of that network, which is like how the feature maps, what the relationship of feature maps they have, matches, let's say, Van Gogh. So it just draws in the pixel space of the picture. But it's the same network. It's a perception network, but just like used the other way around. And that's really interesting. It tells us also a lot about like how agnostic we really should be if we talk about generative AI, because a method that could have been developed for perceptual AI if used in a different way, and it was a really clever way that this group in Tübingen was using it, is suddenly something that is able to invent new stuff then. Yeah.
Hey, quick question for you. What are you learning from this interview? And what do you want to learn next? Well, you probably want to stay ahead of the curve with AI just like we want to, and we want to be your top resource for interesting, cutting-edge AI tools and knowledge here on Metamind. We're finding and interviewing interesting experts from different worlds, different industries, and then we're using this knowledge so we can keep up with AI and improve our success, improve our quality of life. So stay with us on this journey. So first, click on the subscribe button, which you'll find under the videos, so that YouTube puts this into your feed when we release new interviews with AI experts. And if you're enjoying this interview, please give me a like to let others know that this is the real deal. And also, if you know someone who's interested in what we're talking about here, then send this interview to them so that they can learn with you. And I also want to hear from you. So go down to the comments below and let me know, what's your favorite prompt or prompting technique? What are your favorite AI resources or tools? What are you learning from this conversation? Do you disagree with anything we're saying here? And also, what else would you like to learn? Who would you like me to interview here on Metamind? All right, well, go and subscribe, leave me a comment below, and back to our interview. You know, this reminds me, I remember Gregory Burns he's got a book called Iconoclast. It's one of my favorite books. And he talks about how imagination is using the visual system in reverse. And what you're saying here reminds me of this. You're talking about using a perceptual model to then create. Yeah?
Exactly. Yeah. I think there's a big parallel here for sure. Yeah? You're just reversing the process in a way and optimizing on the image itself, and just you can think of it a little bit like it's like a rider on a horse, and the rider has like a carrot in front of it, and the horse is basically this neural network that does the perception, and then we modify basically the input image that we give according, so that everything drifts in a certain direction in the perception of this horse, like that certain feature maps have a certain relationship to each other, and that then looks like Van Gogh, turns out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we should make some glasses for the horse that make the carrot look really big.
Yeah, ultimately, exactly. A lot of machine learning has to do with horses and carrots. It's a really useful concept. If you talk about loss functions, that's essentially it. Yeah. So the loss function is your carrot, and that's also referring to what I was talking before with pattern detection and self-learning systems. Because ultimately, if I want the horse to go to the right, then I put my carrot to the right. Yeah, that's a big difference from putting my carrot to the right and knowing that, okay, I hope then the course goes right, as opposed to telling the horse, oh, you need to move this muscle in this way and then this muscle in this way, and like you don't program the horse. Yeah, you program it by putting the carrot. And it's again, if we think back of what we're seeing now with the advent of large language models in a conversation context like ChatGPT, in a similar way, it's also relating to that. Like we ultimately program the carrot, and the horse is writing the text, and we're just observing that, and then we're changing the position of the carrot and figuring that out. But that seems to be a big theme in machine learning, and I think a really useful metaphor to think of loss functions generally. That we just put that out there, and it tries to move that direction, so it comes closer to the carrot, and it will have some consequences on the network then, and we'll have some training.
What's your definition of the word pattern? And I'm asking because I'm very interested in creativity and in how we represent knowledge and how we imagine and create. And a lot of it comes back to that word pattern, and I've thought about it a lot. How do you define pattern? Or maybe you have multiple definitions for it.
I would really generally define it as a vector that is living in some high-dimensional space. So
a nice simple definition.
That could be like, if we would make it really simple, and we think of the patterns of fish, and we want to basically classify fish, then and this is of course not high-dimensional now, it's super low-dimensional, but low-dimensional would be how big is the fish? Does it swim in salt water, sweet water? Does it what is the shape of the fish? What's the color of the fish? And so on. So all these are basically coordinate systems in some space, and then you see that all fish of some kind, they will cluster around a certain place in a lot of certain place. So if you take basically one of these vectors, that's your pattern. That's basically a pattern vector that is basically measuring all of these different dimensions and giving a value to all of these dimensions. And the pattern emerges because salmon, they look in a similar way. Yeah. And they swim in water maybe, and so on and so forth. So that's why then a pattern emerges across all of these instances.
Yeah, a vector in higher dimensional space. What an elegant way to say pattern. It seems to me too that there needs to be something that is repeating. Right? There has to be some repetition, and then to get to my, what I would kind of like qualify as a pattern. And there also has to be some significance, or there has to be something about it that has that makes it relevant in a way.
Yeah, ultimately it's statistics, like if that stuff happens often, then this kind of pattern emerges from the noise, because you could imagine we also live ourselves in a super high dimensional world, and actually most of the things are completely irrelevant. and our brain is really fine-tuned to learn patterns, to learn new patterns, but also detect the old patterns that we see in our environment. That could be the correlations of certain things that we also experience or see. But ultimately, it's about, as you said, stuff repeating, and that this, like, basically you could think also of this as, hey, this doesn't happen by chance, that we have the same thing. It doesn't happen by chance. So we also have to have a good idea what is actually chance, what is the noise all around us, and then what is the pattern. A really funny, interesting example for that actually is also like how patterns can be broken and abused. There's a really interesting animal that I found a documentary on. It's a spider, actually. It walks, and it's one of these really cute little jumping spiders. Has these wonderful big eyes, and what it does, it's walking around on some kind of like tree twig with a lot of leaves and so on. And there are other insects, and it wants to be camouflaged. And the way that it achieves camouflage is something it's utterly mind-blowing, I find, which is it just moves around like this. It's just constantly moving around. Why is it constantly moving around? Because it looks like debris. It looks like all the other leaves, because the insects are fine-tuned in their own brains, in their own perception, that stuff that moves a bit around like this, hey, this is irrelevant. This is basically the pattern of our surroundings, the pattern of these trees and the twigs and leaves and all of that stuff. And that spider just mimics that pattern. So it goes below the perceptual threshold and can approach this prey. It's really interesting.
It's a moving camouflage. I am also, you're just saying all the buzzwords for me. I'm totally fascinated with camouflage as well. I remember reading that really great insight, which is that all life forms are camouflaged to their environments.
Yeah, totally.
And it's in different dimensions. Some are visual, some are auditory, some have pheromones and smells, and some are movement. And my daughter loves reptiles. And so, chameleons do that same thing to camouflage themselves, which is fascinating. It's a moving camouflage. That was a great example. Yeah, that's cool. Thank you. So we talked pattern and a vector in higher dimensional space, which is, again, beautiful. So then how does this fit into creativity? Then what is creativity?
It's a great question. That's so the thing is, okay, the thing about creativity is, and I come a little bit from the physics perspective, it's from terminology point of view, it's a terrible term, unfortunately. It's not like something where we can, let's say we talk about a hydrogen atom. I can talk about a hydrogen atom and explain to you what it is. And it's a really clear language, what's defined by that. And anyone in the world is able to basically reproduce that and come to the same conclusions and say, oh, of course, this is a hydrogen molecule. And we're all or hydrogen atom, and we're all like extremely clear what it means. Yeah. And we have all the shared understanding. If it comes to terms like consciousness and emotion and creativity, things are different. These are very, we call them squishy in some sense, because there's no rigorous scientific definitions. Psychologists have been battling around this, not only psychologists, also art historians particularly, because they are classically seeing themselves as the people who say who's creative and who's not creative retrospectively. So around creativity, there's like, it's really a squishy term in that sense. The terminology is very unsharp, and one of my favorite examples around that is I think most people but most people around the time when Van Gogh was living would say, oh, he's not creative. He's not creative. He's this crazy guy and draws this weird stuff. But retrospectively, he inspired so many like epochs in art, like expressionism particularly. Was super inspired and driven by Van Gogh, and that made also his work then suddenly very important and influential. So retrospectively, he's defined as creative in some way. If you want to say basically that it has a meaningful impact, because that impact can come, like, I don't know, many years after your death, which was the case in Van Gogh. So it's a really difficult term.
Well, maybe you could even blend this into a maybe more challenging, which is, what is the difference between human creativity and, let's say, generative AI creativity? And maybe that can help or hinder the clarity?
One really important aspect that we have to talk about, like, is the concept of interpolation. We can talk about it in the context of, like, say, two vectors, like this is a vector, this is a vector. Okay, maybe like this, you can see it. And then interpolation between these two vectors would be the vector in the middle, yeah? This is kind of like the sum of two vectors divided, or the mean of vectors. And so to give you an example, if I give you a painting of, if I take a painting of a field and a painting of a field with flowers, maybe, then the interpolation would be a painting of a field with a couple of flowers, maybe, yeah, just something in between. And I think coming up with something like that, in some way, this kind of interpolative creativity it's not very, it's like on the scale of creativity, and it has been also categorized like big, small C category, big C would be rather on the smaller scale of categories of creativity, where it's basically nothing too much novel that's going on. Then again, you could have like a Einstein level or Leonardo da Vinci level of creativity, where it's not like the interpolation between two things that are very similar, but maybe it's like an interpolation between two completely different things and completely different modalities. Yeah, that come together and then form something new. And I think that's a useful way to think also in terms of our own creativity and AI creativity, because as of now, as we're speaking, 2023, AI classically, I think this point of view still holds that AI is kind of like, from its modality perspective, super limited. Like you have, like we're now seeing the emergence of more and more multimodal models. It's coming en vogue, but still it's essentially limited at best to two modalities usually. And our own brain is a super high dimensional modality space. Just imagine, for instance, if I ask you about to think about that meadow, that field, to have it in front of you, to close your eyes and to really think about it. Yeah. Then what you can think about is you can think about how it looks like, of course, how it moves. You can think about the sun, how it feels on your skin, and the wind that you hear maybe in the field. You can think about the way that it smells. You can also think about all the things that are attached to it. Maybe you can think about how nice it was for you as a kid to just explore this, and what a warm feeling you suddenly have. It's like a super multimodal representation that we have of that. So and that's something that AI doesn't have, yeah, in that sense, because it doesn't have this richness of experience. It's not a living thing. It's kind of like more limited to these modalities themselves. And I still think this is massively the case as of now, and will be the case still for the next couple of years. That is very limited. It doesn't have this access to such a rich experience and associations from. I mean, our body, we should not underestimate it. Like, it's how many billions of cells are there, and each little cell is a living thing on its own. Each little cell is absolutely fascinating to study. It's a molecular nanoscale factory in a way that does so many things. No human being understands a single cell. You have to. It's really complex, and we, but made of billions of cells, it's a really complex, intricate, beautiful machine that allows us such a rich repertoire of connections to form between the world and our body and ourselves. So
Beautiful.
that gives to a level of creativity to mesh together things that are so wildly different. I don't think machines can reproduce that now. That being said, if we stay within the modality, let's say generating text, the creativity that we see now with generating text, I would say that what GPT-4 is able to generate in terms of text, in terms of creativity, would beat most humans. I would say maybe more than 95 out of 100, maybe 99 out of 100, it would beat in terms of creativity, what it can come up with, and also in terms of how clean maybe it can develop things. The same goes.
And then when you add the speed to the creativity, then it's astonishing, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's basically instant. It's instant, which unfortunately made the whole field of AI arts a little bit cringeworthy, in some sense, you know. Like when we started with Lunar Ring, it was like 2019. We had to handcraft everything ourselves, program everything ourselves. It was really difficult. Like, and we developed a lot of cool technology, and just so much blood and sweat went into it, and we showed it in exhibitions and so on and so forth. And now in some way, like you just need like a phone and you type in DALL-E 3. You don't even need to do the prompt with DALL-E 3. You just describe it and it makes a prompt for you that will look good.
I know.
But
Amazing.
the output of the images that we have now, I would even say that it's better than what most people are able to draw. Certainly me. I can't draw, but with this, I suddenly have the capability of being able to express things visually. With a level of detail and clarity. It's just truly astonishing, you know?
So, how do you use AI in your everyday life? I also understand you have some kind of interesting innovations around prompting.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't consider myself like a expert prompter because while I really spend a lot of time with prompting, I have seen the work of expert prompters, and it's just so brilliant what they're able to do. So I don't bench with that, but I'm prompting a lot, and I'm using a lot GPT-4, especially for all kinds of things. So what I have to say, what I love doing is using the code interpreter. I think it gives a glimpse into the future. So it's actually called the Advanced Data Analysis plugin that OpenAI delivers in
Yes.
ChatGPT. And this is very cool because GPT-4 is able to program code, and but what you can do with this is you can also execute the code. Yeah. And it executes the code itself. And this is really cool because if it programs the code, we all know one of the great things and awful things at the same time, depends on the point of view that you have. If you're more like leaning to the creative side, it's great things. If you want all the facts and it's the awful things, it's that these networks are able to hallucinate. And I'll never forget that moment when I queried, was GPT 3.5 back in the days, about the software library that I was using, and didn't want to look up the documentation. I just thought, okay, what can I do? What can I do for me? And I want to do this. And ChatGPT gave me some answers, and I thought, wow, this is really amazing. And tried it out, and it was all not implemented. It didn't exist, all of these methods. It just sounded like so perfectly credible.
Yeah.
And this is something interesting when it comes now to this advanced data analysis plugin from OpenAI, because what you can do is you can write tests for the software. So basically, you can say, hey, write me a program that does this and this, and then write also the tests. You don't even have to, this is the funny part. This is the really funniest part of all of it. Like, you don't have to specify. I mean, I'm a person who's notoriously not good at maintaining tests for my software, and it would be actually really good if I would. But so basically, this test for everyone who doesn't have software development background is basically some kind of like things that you can run on your software code base where you know it should put out that result. And if you have like a bunch of tests, then you can mess around with your code and you just run all of the tests and see, oh, everything still runs. It's basically this kind of logic. And something breaks, then you can track it down to, oh, this component is broken because whatever. So you can basically say, oh, I want this and this program, and write some tests that make sense, you know. And then what the fascinating thing, what happens then, it writes a program and it writes these tests, and then it executes the test and sees, oh, does it really work? And if it doesn't work, it says, oh, it doesn't work. Surprisingly, we have to change something. And then it goes and changes. So it's just like looping around until it figures out, until it passes the tests that it wrote itself. And I find that super interesting and fascinating. I think it's going to completely change programming once we hook these kind of develop engines into more our code repositories where they can really work with the code that we are also working with. And I think it's fascinating.
Hmm. That's cool. That's very cool. Yeah, we've used the advanced data analytics just a little bit, and it shocked me with its its ability to analyze complex data instantly. And this is very interesting. Yeah. There's something so you do things around learning languages and
Yeah.
also copy. Do you want to maybe share that a little bit?
Yeah, so I recently moved to Portugal, to Lisbon, to start a new position at the Champalimaud Center for the Unknown. And I want to learn language, obviously. I want to talk to my friends in Portuguese who are Portuguese. And I felt, for me, learning languages, I love to be immersed in the language field, but I also like to have like a very active component there. So I don't like so much to just read something or to do classes where it's all very theoretical. For me, what really helps me is to be able to think in a language. Yeah. To not think in another language, just in that language, and to really force myself to think in that language and to express myself in that language. Basically trying to have conversations. And if you don't know how to speak, there's a little bit of an, it's a little bit like maybe obnoxious thing to do. But also it would be even more obnoxious to expect the other person to always correct you, because it breaks the communication flow. Because ultimately, if you talk to people, we want to have a communication, not just to basically have ourselves corrected, which is why tandem partners exist, right? It's like opening a little space where you meet someone with whom you want to share the language, and within that time window, it's okay with every sentence to say, okay, this you could have said or said like this and this. So I was thinking, can I bring that also, can I do that with ChatGPT, essentially? And the answer is yes. So I'm learning Portuguese with that. Actually, with great success. It really gives me a lot of confidence, maybe too much confidence. I have to pay back when people talk back very fast in Portuguese, and it's a difficult language on the pronunciation to grab. And that's something that I don't study, but that I've not studied enough because it's more chat-based. If you want, I can give you a demo what that looks like, actually.
I'd love to see it.
So what I'm using for doing this is the OpenAI platform. You can do that as well in ChatGPT, but I was experimenting a little bit around with the platform. What I like about the platform, what you cannot do with ChatGPT, is that you can have here the systems prompt, which I have, for instance, in the following. I want to have a realistic conversation with you in Portuguese. You could swap that for any language, by the way, of course. Obviously, you can learn German or English or whatever. And it's just... then here a bit more text, what it should do. This is the prompt. And here I have an example of a conversation that I just hard-coded in, basically, and I just continue that, basically. So what I do first is I want to talk about a topic, and I'm simulating a conversation. So for instance, if I want to go to a fish shop, then I simulate a fish shop conversation. Actually, we could do that. I want to talk about somebody about buying fish, yeah? You just tie that, yeah. And what's not so nice about, but another advantage of this platform is here that you can have all of these models, the temperature, maximum length. You can define a lot of other parameters here. That's a nice thing. Comes at the price that it's a bit, the usability is a bit smaller than with ChatGPT, but it also works with ChatGPT quite fine. So what it comes up first is I want to talk to somebody about buying fish, and then it invents first a persona, yeah, that is capable of giving me that answer, and it's the Margarida Pescadora, she's also called. So it's a fisherman woman. She's middle-aged with a warm and hearty laugh. It's the famous Mercado da Ribeira in Lisbon. It's a very touristy market here, but they sell amazing fish, actually. And her love and vibrant, okay, blah, blah, blah. Conversation context, I also invent that. The user is looking to buy some fish for dinner tonight. So now the conversation starts. Margarida Pescadora. Hola. Que posso ajudar-te? What can I help you to find today? We have fish direct to Mel. And then I can answer something and say, hola. Hoy quiero saber más sobre wise Peixas. I'm going to make a typo here. I think it's Peixas with an E, but I'm going to make a typo. Hence, I want to learn more about what fish you have. Okay, let me hit enter. And now what we get is a correction, like how it should have been. Hola, hoy quiero saber más sobre wise Peixas with E. You see the Peixas. And then it gives a comment about it. A palabra, paces, is the incorrect. So the word paces is incorrect. The correct form is e, and the plural, so it's pace, and the plural is paces. What I really like about this is all in Portuguese. So I'm immersed. I don't leave so much the Portuguese language space. So I can really stay in that conversation, learn a little bit about that, and continue. Claro, temos una grande variedade, sardinha, robalo, dorado, bacalhau, qual prefere. And it's a kind of real conversation that I can ask her, can she fillet me dorado? Yeah. Possivel, possivel que filetes me uma dorada. So is it possible that you fillet me? É possível que me files. Yeah, and it says the order of your words is a little bit confused. But in Portuguese, the way that you would say it is like this. Okay, so files now filetes, and then the conversation continues. So it doesn't always catch everything in the commentary, but in the correction, it usually gets everything. And it's also a test. I asked some of my Portuguese friends to double check what they think. They haven't been able to spot any errors with it. This being said, it's possible that it does some errors, but the damage that I think this does is comparably small to what gives it to me, because so here's what I do. If I actually go to the Mercado de Ribeira, which I've just done yesterday, I simulate the conversation that I'm about to have. And so I know a lot of vocabulary, I know a lot of things to ask. I can just probe the grounds a little bit. I know the context, and then I can have that conversation, and it's wonderful. I love it. It really helps me making friends with the fish people also. And nice to have that. And just think, if you would want to have the same kind of understanding of the context and situation without this, what would I would have to study the vocabulary of some fish. Then I would maybe read about something. It would be cumbersome, yeah. But with this, like within a very short time, I can get up to speed about certain things. So I try to simulate all kinds of different conversations. I'm taking guitar classes, in Portugal, so I learn a lot about what are the names of the fingers, how the guitar is held, what is important, and so on and so forth. So it's a really nice and active way. I have some more examples in here. I could show them to you if you like, or if you have more questions about that, I'm happy to.
No, this is beautiful. Show us one more. It's you've basically prompted in order to have not just a language teacher and tutor, but a creative one, an interactive one, and one that's transmitting on all these different dimensions at once.
Yeah, exactly. And always really correcting you also. That's the really important part. So, and giving you a bit of intuition for the language and really forcing you to be active, because that's a really difficult thing. For instance, I was, before coming here, learning a little bit Portuguese with DuoLingo on my phone. And I got all of these rewards and massive streaks and so many diamonds and stuff. It's like I thought really I was on top of my game until I actually went to a place, to a cafe, and tried to order a coffee, and it was not possible because I just didn't know how to do it. I just knew how to fill out maybe a word or something, or to play some mini game that's completely utterly useless. But I realized I'm doing this for 1.5 months. I'm not able to order a coffee. What's wrong? It's something utterly wrong about it. Like I need this active component for myself to learn language. That's really super important.
It's like a simulated immersion.
Exactly. It's a simulated immersion of a conversation. Of course, it would be greater if that conversation was be held with pronunciation and also that it's text to speech. Basically, that would be the next generation of these systems. I think it's totally possible to also improve the pronunciation, that the AI detects, oh, this word you should pronounce a bit better. That would be basically the next level, that you really have a real language. That being said, it's also very useful to do it in written, because then you know all the funny perks of how to write things. It's also can be quite useful. So the copywriter one that I have, it's a really simple one actually. So I read this books of Gary Provost. He's an editor, and he wrote these wonderful books like 100 Ways to Improve Your Writing. Really, book inspired me a lot in my own writing. And I have to say, I don't really like writing so much. And I was often forced to write, like for my PhD. I don't like it so much. I love doing bullet points. That's easy, but to put that into nice prosa is difficult. So I just have a copywriter that I call Gary Provost, and he's pretending to be Gary Provost and keeping things in the spirit of Gary Provost. So what I usually do when I write is I just continue what I would just say what I want to write. I'd say I want to write an invitation letter. Should cover the following. Like a dinner party, maybe. Okay, for a dinner party, actually, for something I have to say, for communication with my friends and so on, I would not use ChatGPT. Maybe so it's not let's say it's a conference on generative AI focus on immersion, takes place in Lisbon in January, just as an example. And then I can just have it write that text. And that's what I usually do. And this is kind of like a meta level of writing that I think is very interesting that we can do this now is, so instead of like writing everything ourselves, and yet I don't think we have actually the perfect tool to do this, it invites to really a new form of writing, because in some way we want to change maybe some global aspects of that, maybe the tone of it. So for instance, we could say, hey, write it in a bit more friendly and warm tone. That's one possibility what we could do, but then again, we could also say that certain words we want to replace. So I think it's and then it just writes this text for me. And
will you read your prompt, your system prompt?
How do you mean read it?
Just read it out loud.
Oh yeah, you are Gary Provost, an excellent writer and editor, and have an enormous experience in writing very clear, simple, and yet elegant text that can be easily understood. You have written multiple books on how to help people improve their writing, such as Make Your Words Work and 100 Ways to Improve Your Writing. You always keep it brief and don't explain or justify much. Do not write like an advertiser or marketer. I find it quite important to put, because unfortunately of this HR assistant tone that ChatGPT loves. Keep a neutral tone and don't use fancy words. Instead, use simple language, simple words. The key is to get the message across and be understood. Therefore, you choose the most simple way to explain things. However, don't repeat yourself and explain things only once. So basically, the way I do this is like I write texts, and every time I want to change something, then I just basically put it in here and I see if it produces the results. But ultimately, what I mainly use it for is I convert like bullet points that I have into written text and do it with small chunks. And that's basically what this section would do here.
Beautiful. Yeah, very elegant prompting.
Yeah, it's still quite primitive. I think this can be taken much further, also in terms of user interface. I think there's a big future in that to bring that basically in a different way, that you can work with the text, and in some way, instead of like really writing the text, I think we go to more like a role of curating texts and make it precise so we can really understand it well. And you could also think in a way that you are producing a text, and then you have then you would have agents. Agents are a very interesting topic also, that try to understand the text, and you have to write the right text to get it understood by the agents. It's also a very interesting way to write. So I think I would go as far as say the advent of ChatGPT, what it does for writing is probably comparable to the invention of writing itself. I would go as far as this. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're just like very beginning where people are trying to mess around with it and see what they can do and what are the use cases and how to use these systems. But it's still very, very, very early. I'm thinking back of the days, it's just like a couple of years ago. I can't believe it. It's just like 4 or 5 years, maybe tops ago. I remember us messing around with the first language models that we run on our computer, and how fascinated we were, like, of this garbling that is like, it kind of makes sense, you know, in some way. Sometimes it makes a bit sense, and we are fascinated by that. To come now to a system which is like, oh wow, it writes way better than I can write, or I can get really good feedback about something, or I can have a conversation with it. Really crazy. Think about it, like in what short time that all happened with large language models.
Okay, quick action step here. So the key is learning how to prompt better. You start out prompting by just asking questions and talking to AI like it's a helper, but you quickly realize that getting better at prompting is a huge accelerator and game changer for your own success in life. So these prompts will not only help you get a lot more done faster and accelerate your success, but they'll also help you really get prompting and get better at it. You can get all of these as a gift from me just by going to metamind.co/gift. That's metamind.co/gift, and I'll put that link below, and then just opt in to get it. I've also created a powerful video for you called AI in the Future of Business and Work and Success that demonstrates some of the key mindsets and prompting strategies to help you get up to speed and get a lot more out of generative AI. And it's also included as a free gift when you register. So just head over to metamind.co/gift to get your AI Accelerator Prompt Pack and the other free goodies. All right, back to our interview. You're also interested in the intersection of generative AI and psychedelics and digital therapeutics. What is this and how does that work?
So digital therapeutics is a kind of like a new field. It's like kind of like a digital medicine. It's basically using computer technology, and particularly these days AI technology, to treat people, to come up with new form of treatment plans that could be treatments for certain disorders, like for instance a motor disorder, let's say for stroke recovery, and you want to regain your ability to move again. You could imagine AI systems that help you doing that really very closely monitor you, very closely monitor your capability, and also bring it in some gamified context that really is tailored to you. So it's basically the interesting thing about this therapies is they're very tailored to us. Yeah, it's very personalized, per definition, form of therapy. And we can also think of other mental diseases, like disorders like particularly depression or stress disorder, that could be very interesting for this forms of therapy, where we are able to generate stimuli at the same time. And that's something that we are now working very closely with. We're building up a new institute actually at the Center for the Unknown that is for digital therapeutics, and AI as one of the centerpieces here. And it's in particular the combination of perceptual AI that is able to monitor humans and interpret us humans. So, for instance, it could understand what we say. It could see how we say it, what is the emotion that we say it, how we move, what we do with our bodies. It, of course, can measure all kinds of other physiological aspects like heartbeat racing or something. And so on and so forth. And we combine that with generative AI. So using this information that we know about the subject, what can we generate? What can we germinate? Can we feed back to that person to change basically the state of mind of the person? Yeah? And this then it's like a kind of like a closed loop system, and we do that in we're building immersive labs at the moment. You can think of that as a room where you go. It's a little bit maybe like a holodeck in the farthest sense, where you have visuals all around you completely, and 360-degree sound systems, also body tracking above you, so you don't see that also, but your body is being tracked, and you're part of inside of that system. And these systems then are capable of ultimately they can be capable of extracting something that is inside of you and bringing that to the outside, and using that material to work with. So it's a super duper experimental approach, of course, super duper novel in the sense to combine generative AI here in the loop And we are not therapists, obviously, we are technologists and scientists. What we are working is we're opening basically a contact surface for people with a background in therapeutics or psychiatry or neurology to come and just experience these technologies themselves, and then to take that as a starting basis for developing then prospectively new forms of therapy. Psychedelics come in the game as it's an observation that we've made is because ultimately, if we're talking about immersion, we're talking about going to a place and basically forgetting everything around you and coming into a state of flow, coming into a state where you're really very present. You don't have mind wandering. Basically, you're very present, and you're very present in this kind of immersive activity. And we found that psychedelics are something in the first approximation can be agent that facilitates this immersion. So basically the level of, so for instance, if you go into a virtual reality environment and you do this under the influence of psychedelics, there's early experimental science that show very promising results here, that basically you much more believe that you're actually in this environment. You're much more immersed. And there's also strong interaction effects that we have observed between psychedelics and generative AI that we don't currently understand the nature of these effects, but there seems to be a very strong interplay between how these stimuli are generated, like visuals, for instance, and how our brain processes these, and then the different processing that happens in case of psychedelics really can tell us then something about ultimately also about the structure of our brain and how information is processed there. I show you, it's actually the new technology that we're developing. It's called latent blending. We've developed it ourselves. It uses latent diffusion from stability, and it's a text-to-video method. And what it's able to do is it's able to make a beautiful slow transitions that we are very obsessed with back in the day. So this is basically, I'll speed it up a little bit so we can see it. So basically what we use, we have also a chain of prompts that develops a lot of surreal imagery. So we just basically have a master prompt that develops this surreal imagery, and then we have this text-to-video method, latent blending, that we also open sourced, that then can create this kind of flow that goes across this whole image. It's like kind of like a spaceship that allows you to travel through like an imagination space of the machine. You can really travel through that space, traverse that space, and you can do that in real time. That would be something that would be also an interesting application for this immersive spaces that I was talking about before. It's basically confronting you with visuals that are reactive to your own reaction, or maybe to your own body, and maybe it could be something that tries to extract your concept of beauty. How cool would that be? That you have a machine that observes you and tries to bring this sense of awe out in you and find very personalized what is your beauty. So this just endlessly traverses through all kinds of image spaces and has this beautiful smooth transitions between them.
Fascinating.
And it's just this weird, strange, and I can basically have that on any kind of topics. I have this topic also here. I particularly like for its aesthetics, where I blend together, I think, organic structures with cosmic structures. And I find it always very interesting, this kind of fractal way of self-similarity with some patterns that we see in outer space, or on a cosmic scale also, very large scale. It kind of resembles patterns that we see in small scale. It's self-similarity property, and this is a little bit what this is playing with. So we have these organic structures and all of these nebulas, and they're mixing along. And the cool thing is this is going to be possible to make just with basically bringing together just by typing outer space and organic structures, and then you play. Just wait a little bit until it's pre-computed. Doesn't take long, actually. It's super fast. And then you get this. It's just like this endless flow that you can couple to music, that you can couple to your movement. That's just like this vivid imagery. So it's like a kind of like a machine to dive into this imagination lands, and almost like in a spaceship to travel through that. And get these new worlds that you can traverse.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Looking into the future.
Yeah. Ultimately, this in 3D would be very interesting. This in 3D,
Absolutely.
the brain activity, it would be fascinating. It's like kind of like just imagine to be in a VR and we're reading your brain activity, and it's really like you're building a world and you can just change it by looking at it and reforming it in some way, or maybe activating it in some interesting. So it opens a lot of ways for the very novel ways that we can interact with AI, and in some way, if we take a step back and think, why has it been so successful? Then it's ultimately, I would say, two things that happened there. Like one is the supernatural interface of natural language in the context of conversation. And secondly, it is that it's really useful. It can do stuff that's really useful. Like we can tell it, I have in my fridge this and this and this. What are the great things you can cook with? Yeah, and it tells us something that's useful. And in some way, this immersive technologies, this closed loop things is similar. We can use the expression of our whole body and of our voice, of our language, of our tone in the voice and our movement in the body, and where we look, all of this natural expression that we have anyway, that we also share if we have a conversation in real life, particularly. And it uses all of that information as a very low threshold for the interface, basically. And at the same time, it gives you these superpowers. It can create worlds in 3D out of the nothingness. I think it's very interesting platform to build various things that can have an positive impact on the lives of people.
Wonderful. Wow. Thank you. All right. I have one last question for you, Johannes. So we started speaking. You mentioned that in physics they have this kind of elegant connection between the practical, where they can do the experiments and see it work, and the models and the theory. Several years ago I saw Brian Greene interviewing 4 of the top theoretical physicists in the world at the time, and I'm not a physicist, so I don't know this world. But it was a very interesting conversation. And in the end, he basically said to them, all right, guys, what's really going on? What's really happening? And each of them had a different pet theory about what was really going on. And that really blew my mind, because I realized, oh my God, the physicists all have different ideas about, what's happening. And so what is consciousness? What is it?
It's a really fascinating topic, because ultimately, what we do know is consciousness is very, very much related to the activity in your brain. Yeah, we could. So given your brain activity, we can really learn a lot about what is your conscious state, and also modifying brain activity, for instance, stimulating your brain in the right place. It also can give you certain kind of sensations. Or even coming back to the topic of psychedelics, what ultimately psychedelics will do is they change the dynamics of neural communication. So how one neuron communicates with the other one, just reweights things a little bit in a nutshell. And that has impact on small scale neural circuits, on all scales actually of the brain. There's changes. So basically changes in information processing happen. And for everyone who has made this experience with psychedelics, it changes reality itself. Yeah, it's a different reality that you're in. It's utterly fascinating. So at the same time, it is absolutely possible that our consciousness in this kind of different place where we are, like outside, like in some sense, outside of like the representation of that physics hardware, what's going on, more like the space of thinking, the space of existing, the space of qualia, that this itself has, again, that there's also a loop in the other direction, basically that this can basically change the underlying system. So it's like a two-way modulation that happens there. So
is it possible that the consciousness came first and the system came later?
I think they both came at the same time. Ultimately, in all fairness, probably the system came first, because consciousness mainly came like in the Cambrian explosion, maybe earliest when there was nervous systems developing. But I do believe that it's ultimately very much tied to some aspects of information processing that happens. And it's also really, I really believe it's tied to physics. It's a physical phenomena of consciousness, I would say. In some aspects, I feel it's maybe shared. Like if you have, like, let's say, a wire, and you have like a electrical current running through that wire, then you induce a magnetic field around that. So it's like really closely related, and you have this Maxwell equations that study that exactly in detail how that works. But so they're coupled phenomena, and in some sense, there's a possibility. I believe that this is a quite interesting avenue, that some aspect of information processing leads to consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Like electric current leads to a magnetic field. It's like actually like a physical thing that happens. And that also, of course, then means what is this aspect that really gives rise to consciousness, and who really has consciousness? Is it just us humans, or primates, or higher order mammals, or is it also the spider that we were talking about before? Does it have consciousness?
Mm-hmm.
I personally would say yes, it has consciousness, but maybe not the way that we have it. But it's able to plan, it's able to reason, and it's able to feel its environment. And I feel it also very well might have some form of qualia, some form of existence, some form of being, you know.
Mm-hmm. Johannes, we'll put some links to your work down below here, below the interview. Thank you so much. I enjoyed our conversation so much.
Same here. Thank you so much.
So thank you for watching another Metamind AI interview. Remember to keep practicing prompting, keep learning, get our prompt pack and quick start video, watch our other videos to learn from other AI experts, and stay tuned to us here on Metamind. Stay subscribed, because this is going to get really interesting.